Ever heard of a marketing campaign so disastrous it led to riots, lawsuits, and even death? No, this isn't some movie script. This is the absolutely wild, true story of Pepsi's Number Fever, a contest that promised millions but ended up delivering nothing but pure chaos.
And believe me, that is not an exaggeration. Today, we're going to break down exactly how a simple bottle cap promotion in the Philippines spiraled completely out of control, leading to riots, bombings, and tragically costing real human lives.
Okay, so to really get how this all went so wrong, we have to understand the dream that Pepsi was selling. Let's rewind the clock. The year is 1992, we're in the Philippines, and for millions of people, what seems like a life-changing opportunity has just landed on their doorstep. So the whole thing was called Number Fever, and honestly, the concept was genius in its simplicity. Here's how it worked. Every single night, the news would announce a winning number. All you had to do was check the number under your Pepsi bottle cap. If it matched, boom, you were a winner. It was so simple, so accessible, and it tapped right into that universal dream of, striking it rich.
But the grand prize, that was the real jackpot. We're talking 1 million pesos. Now you gotta understand, back in 1992, for the average family in the Philippines, this wasn't just a lot of money. No, it was a ticket to a completely different life. People were literally stockpiling bottle caps, some were even digging through the trash, all for just a shot at that dream.
And this thing became an absolute phenomenon. I mean, according to Pepsi's own numbers, half the entire country's population was playing along. Think about that. It wasn't just some marketing promo anymore. It became a full-blown national obsession. It's kind of a perfect example of how a simple lottery can just completely capture the imagination of a whole nation.
But, with all that massive popularity came a really fateful decision. See, Pepsi wanted to capitalize on this incredible success, so they made a choice that would set the stage for one of the biggest corporate blunders in modern history.
So because the contest was such a hit, Pepsi decided to extend it for another 5 weeks into May. Great news, right? Well, not exactly. Because that extension somehow introduced a critical computer glitch, basically a mix-up in the winning numbers that, it would prove absolutely catastrophic on the evening of May 25th.
Okay, so here's how the system was supposed to work. To keep the prize money under control, Pepsi had what they thought was a foolproof system. A computer would pick the winning number, and then they'd make sure only 2 bottle caps with that number were ever put into circulation for each drawing. Just 2. That's how they kept the whole thing from bankrupting them.
Right, but that computer glitch, it turned their foolproof system into an absolute time bomb. The number 349, remember that number, it was supposed to be a non-winning number, a dud. So the bottling plants just printed it like crazy. And the result? Over 600,000 caps with the number 349 were now floating around the Philippines.
And then it happened. At 6 p.m. on the dot, the news anchor came on and announced the winning number, 349. Just imagine that moment. Hundreds of thousands of people, many of them holding handfuls of these caps, all suddenly believed their lives had just changed forever. The streets just erupted in celebration.
But that incredible nationwide celebration, it was tragically short-lived. The very next morning, as hundreds of thousands of brand-new millionaires rushed to Pepsi factories to claim their prizes, the company started to realize the horrifying scale of their mistake. The dream was about to turn into a total nightmare.
And this, right here, is the heart of the whole conflict. If Pepsi honored every single one of those caps, it would have cost them billions. Billions! So after what must have been a frantic all-night meeting, they came up with a plan. They blamed a computer error and made a counteroffer, 500 pesos, which is about $8 for each winning cap. It was just a tiny, tiny fraction of what was promised.
The public's reaction was, as you can imagine, swift and absolutely furious. People felt cheated, betrayed. Riots just broke out across the country. Mobs started throwing Molotov cocktails at Pepsi plants. They bombed over 30 of their delivery trucks. And in all that violence, 5 people would end up dead, with dozens more injured.
But that chaotic, raw anger, it soon transformed into something else, an organized fight for justice. These new winners, they weren't just going to take this insult lying down. No way. They were determined to hold a multi-billion-dollar corporation accountable for its promise.
So a group called Coalition 349 formed, and they hit Pepsi with a massive lawsuit for over $400 million. And for a minute there, it looked like they might actually win. They had this brief moment of victory when a court issued an arrest warrant for 9 Pepsi executives. It really seemed like the tide might be turning in their favor.
But then, the story took an even darker, more twisted turn. A police officer came forward with this absolutely stunning allegation. He claimed that Pepsi had actually hired people to infiltrate the protest groups and deliberately cause violence. The goal? To discredit Coalition 349 and paint them as terrorists in court.
Now, for their part, Pepsi's lawyers immediately and strongly denied everything. They called the allegations completely baseless. And while the claims were obviously explosive, they were never actually proven in court. So that was pretty much the end of that whole line of inquiry.
So all of this brings us to the final outcome. After years and years of protests, lawsuits, and just general turmoil, the legal battles finally came to an end, and they left behind a really deep and lasting scar on the country. The legal fight dragged on for what felt like forever, but finally, in 2006, the Philippine Supreme Court officially closed the book on the whole case. And the final ruling? The court found that Pepsi had not been negligent. Almost all of the civil and criminal cases were just dismissed. After all the chaos, all the violence, and the deaths, Pepsi's only official penalty was a single fine of 150,000 pesos.
But a legal verdict like that, it just doesn't capture the human cost, does it? For so many people in the Philippines, the trauma of number fever is still very, very real. I mean, even decades later, just saying the name Pepsi can still be a deeply sensitive topic.
When PepsiCo was asked about this whole disaster recently, they issued a statement. In it, they said they deeply regret any pain their mistake caused. But they also made sure to point out that, these events happened almost 30 years ago, and the executives who were involved back then, well, they aren't with the company anymore.
And that really brings us to the final lingering question, doesn't it? This whole story is just a wild case study in corporate responsibility, in marketing ethics, and the devastating human cost of what started as a simple mistake. So I guess we'll just leave you with this to think about. When things go this catastrophically wrong, what does real accountability actually look like?